Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam Study Circle. We'll start off with a segment on the Quran. The verse that we are going to study, in fact, there are three verses that we'll study today. They are verses 2 to 4 of Surah Anfal, which is the 8th surah of the Quran, and they actually signify what exactly is meant by true faith. So the words of the Quran are إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ أُولَئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا لَهُمْ دَرَجَاتٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. True believers are those whose hearts are filled with awe at the mention of God, and when His revelations are recited before them, their faith grows stronger, and they are ones who trust their Lord alone, show diligence in their prayer, and spend for our cause from what we have given them. It is these who are true believers. For them are ranks before their Lord, forgiveness and a noble sustenance. Viewers, you can see that these verses, they bring out the essence of faith. How as Muslims, how as people who bow down before the Almighty, they have their own intuition and their own nature so aligned with the Almighty's directives that whenever they feel and whenever they listen to His directives, they acknowledge that this is the call of their own hearts. And not only that, these hearts, they shudder at the mention of God, because they know that the Almighty, who's watching over them, who has taken a covenant from them, who has been so merciful to them, so gracious to them, but at the same time, the blessings that He has given them, they will not be left unattended, and they'll not be left unaccounted for. So the important thing is that whatever God has blessed us with, that has to be taken to account. We will be held accountable before the Almighty, and precisely for this reason, the Quran says that believers are those whose hearts are filled with awe, and they tremble at the mention of God. And this trembling of yours is not of the nature of trembling in which you see a horrible sight or something that scares you. On the other hand, this trembling is more out of respect. It is more out of love for the Almighty. It is more out of affection that we would not like to displease Him. And remember, displeasing the Almighty is not something that's going to affect adversely in His own ways in any way. He does not need our being righteous, so to speak, for His own purpose. Righteousness is something that we need for our own selves. And when the Almighty is angry with us that we are not behaving up to the mark, or we are not being righteous, so that is precisely what we also face from our own parents in this world. They get angry not because they are losing something. They get angry at their children, at their offspring, when they see that their offspring are doing something below the mark, because that something is going to affect their own lives, not the lives of the parents. So in a very similar way, the Almighty, He is watching over us. He would like to spend our lives in a way which is conducive and in harmony with our own nature and with the dictates of the religion which has been revealed to us. And this is something which is befitting, and it behooves us, and it is something that only we would like ourselves at the same time. And when we become parents, we behave in the same way for our children also. So the awe of God must be understood in its correct perspective, that basically it implies tremendous respect and honor for His being. And not only that, it says, وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. And when His revelations are recited before them, their faith grows stronger, and they are ones who trust their Lord alone. So when the revelations, when the Quran is recited before believers, it makes their faith go stronger, because when they see that the Quran reflects what our human nature actually stands for, when they see that the promises of the Almighty, they are being fulfilled in many cases, and in some cases we await them to be fulfilled. When they see that at the same time God is watching over us, He's merciful upon us, He is taking care of our affairs, He has created this whole world for our own service. So this is something which makes them realize that they are not alone in this world. They are not in any way left alone by the Almighty. He's not aloof. He is watching over them. He is taking care of them, and at the same time, whenever they commit any mistake, he cautions and prods them. He at the same time also makes them feel and realize that as human beings we need to thank the favors that we have been blessed with. So this is something, when we read from the Quran, when we read this corroboration that we find in our own nature from the Quran, our faith grows, because now we see that whatever is being done, whatever the Quran stands for, is something which our own inner self reflects. So this is like our own faith and our own inner self becoming harmonized with God's revelations, and this makes our faith go stronger. And this is precisely what the Quran implies here. And it takes one additional step, and it says that these are people who also trust their Lord. When they see that they are passing through trying circumstances, they are passing through stringent circumstances, circumstances that might adversely affect their own lives, they trust the Almighty that, well, this is a case in which we have to be fully conversant with the fact when we are made to pass through these trials and tribulations, it is not that the Almighty is against us in any way. He wants to test us. He knows that if we pass through these trials, we'll become stronger than before. He knows that these trials are going to take us closer to the Almighty. He knows that these trials are going to prepare us for something more difficult that we might need to face in life, and hence become stronger. So, whenever they are faced with a situation, their trust grows in the Almighty. They feel that they have to trust the Almighty. It is not that He is trying to punish them in any way, or He's trying to be ruthless in any way. Of course, that has its own in area in which a person at times is punished by the Almighty, but in most cases these trials and tribulations are meant to caution and prod us, to make us stronger, to bring us closer to the Almighty, and at the same time make us realize that the Almighty wants to check whether in these difficult circumstances we still thank Him, because it's always easy to thank God in circumstances which are conducive to us, in which we are living in a comfortable way. It is only when we pass through these circumstances which are tough that our mettle is tested, and which the Almighty would like to do, and He does so continuously. So our faith in Him grows, and at the same time we trust that whatever He is doing for our own good. And then the Quran says, "Allazina yuqimuna as-salata wa mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun," that these are those people who are very diligent in the prayer. They are diligent in the prayer, which means that they are regular in their prayer. They take their prayer to be a serious affair. They know that when they are praying, they are connecting to the Almighty. They are thanking Him for His favors, and at the same time acknowledging that they are creatures who need to acknowledge the fact that, yes, there is one great being who is looking after them, and they are humble in their approach. And at the same time, they also realize that the greatest way to thank the Almighty by prostrating before Him, by acknowledging the fact that we are weaklings, we need His help, and also at the same time, whatever blessings we have, that we need to distribute it among those people who are underprivileged. And then that is why the very next clause states that they are one who spend for the cause of God. So spending for the cause of God connects us to our fraternity, and praying connects us to our Creator. So we will see this vertical horizontal relationship being mentioned in the Quran on numerous occasions in this tone. We have a vertical relationship with the Almighty, and we have a horizontal relationship with our own fraternity. And this makes us realize that as individuals, we need to be indebted not only to the Almighty, but also to people around us. Remember, when we are spending for the cause of God, it's not that we are doing a favor. In fact, we must realize that a favor is being done to us, because the Almighty is now giving us the opportunity to spend for His cause, to earn more reward. So basically, if anyone is being shown a favor, it is the person who is spending in the cause of God. And this is what the Quran says. And then it reminds us that, remember, the blessings and the riches and the wealth that we spend in the cause of God, it's not that we have earned them or we have found them one fine day. It is basically, or these riches are basically God-given. They are a blessing from God. So however much we might think that we have earned them, in fact, we have been given and blessed them by the Almighty. So we must not forget that if we are dispensing our charity or dispensing things for the cause of God, the amount that we have also has come from God. It's just returning back to God what we have gained from God. And this is something which at times becomes elusive to us. We lose sight of this reality, but we must keep sight of this reality that we are distributing God's wealth back to people. And if basically this wealth is something which has been given to us by the Almighty Himself. And the Quran then gives us this beautiful news and this glad tiding. It says, Ulaika humul mu'minuna haqqa, that it is these people who are true believers, and for them are ranks before the Almighty and forgiveness and a very noble sustenance. Because if they are going to discharge their duty in a sincere way, in a way in which people will remember their contribution to life, then the Almighty is also going to honor them by forgiving them, by blessing them with a noble sustenance, of course, referring to the life of paradise, and also high ranks in the life of paradise. So, viewers, with these few words, we now move on to our next segment, which is a hadith that we study generally. And the hadith that we are going to study today, it has been selected from the Al-Jami' al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. It says, An Abi Zar, qala lin Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, la tahqiranna min al-ma'roof shay'an, walau an talqa akhaka biwajhin taliq. Abu Zar stated, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said to me, do not consider anything among good conduct to be insignificant, even if it is as trivial as meeting your brother with a cheerful countenance. So, prophets of God, as we have seen, as we've been discussing and also reading and studying all through our segments of hadith, they bring out they try to bring out the best in ourselves, and they do so by telling us that we must always find an opportunity to be good. We must always find an opportunity to be kind, to be generous, to be affectionate to people. And for this, they say that even these small acts of kindness that we might think that they are trivial in nature, but they are not trivial in fact before God. So it is said that anything among good conduct to be insignificant must not be thought of as insignificant. I mean, if you are meeting your brother or your sister or your own fraternity, someone from your own fraternity, with a smiling face, with a cheerful countenance, then this too is something which is very valuable before the sight of God. Don't think that meeting people and greeting them is in this way is a small act of kindness. It's basically God's own prescription that if we are to require ourselves, if we are to make ourselves come up to the mark, then it is here that we need to understand that people who are around us must find us to be cheerful. People who are around us must think that we are always caring about them. They must think that we regard them to be special. We, of course, this doesn't mean that we should not care about our own selves. This is a given. Every person has been given this responsibility to take care of his own self, his own needs, and the needs of his family. But at the same time, the person cannot ignore the people around him, the people who live around him. And these people are all, I mean, you find them everywhere. They are at your workplace, they are amongst your neighbors, they are amongst your friends, they are amongst your relatives. So about all such people, the Quran says that your first exposure to such people is how you look to them, look at them, in fact, in your own face. So the Quran says that before you even begin speaking to such people, before you even start conversing with such people, you must appear to be cheerful to them. You must see them with a smiling face. Because you see, when you smile at other people, it gives them that welcoming encouragement. It tells them that you are there for them. It tells them that you are a person of their own fraternity. Even a person you don't know, if you just smile at that person will make, I mean, he'll get this feeling that he is someone who's been watched over, who's been looked after. And at other occasions, of course, we know that the Prophet has given this direction that you must say salam or peace to people you meet, and he has said that it's not just that you greet people who you know. So he has made this point on one occasion that you must greet people who you don't even know, who you just come across while maybe crossing a road or maybe going through any place, and you're just crossing a pathway, someone comes in front of you. So before I mean, you think that that person is known to you, that doesn't matter. Even if he's not known to you, you should be greeting that person. And of course, before you utter anything to greet that person, you have to be a smiling face. You have to give that person a smiling face, because that person is now going to assess you from what you are to him or her. And remember that this cheerful countenance, this smiling face, is something which at times we need to even at times we need to even act, put a little artificial act upon that as well. Because you see, it's difficult for us on many occasions to hide our own worries. It's very difficult to hide our own problems, isn't it? I mean, it's really tough at times. But when we are out in the open and we are going across other people, then the Almighty wants us, His Prophet wants us that we hide our worries. We forget about those worries and put up a cheerful countenance, because on the one hand, it's going to convey something very meaningful to the people that we come into contact. And on the other hand, it will be an act of gratitude, that we thank the Almighty, we still smile to other people instead of being afflicted ourselves, instead of being in a spot of bother, we still smile, and that smile is actually an acknowledgement. It's like greeting. It's like not only greeting other people, it's like thanking the Almighty that yes, if I am in a spot of bother, that there are so many other things that I still am blessed with. So I'm going to keep account of my blessings. I'm going to be positive and keep that cheerful countenance. Because we now go to the third segment of our study circle, and this is a Bible verse that we study in every Islamic study circle. So the verse that we're going to study today is from the Gospel of Matthew, is chapter number 6, verse 24. The words are, "No man is able to be a servant to two masters, for he will have hate for the one and love for the other, or he will keep to one and have no respect for the other. You may not be servants of God and of wealth." So these words, of course, spoken by none other than Jesus, peace be upon him, they basically give us this very, very important insight in life, that when we become greedy, when our heart becomes tilted towards the love for wealth, remember, it's not the normal inclination of for wealth that we have that is being talked about here. The specific context will tell us that it's basically greed and lust for wealth which is being talked about. So lusting after wealth, trying to accumulate wealth at the cost of other people. So these beautiful words of Jesus, they remind us that, well, you can either have that lust for God or you can have the love for God, because the two cannot go together. Because what God has given us is something that He wants us to spend for His cause. We cannot serve two masters at the same time. This is against our nature. We cannot be inclined to wealth so much. And if we are inclined to wealth and we become so greedy and we start hoarding money and amassing riches and being absolutely indifferent to the needs of our society, then basically we have made that wealth our God. And precisely that is what these verses, or this verse, tries to warn us about, that either you can serve God or you can serve greed. So God and greed cannot go together. God has directed us to spend for His cause. And that cause, of course, is something which is not going to go away. It's not just that we are emptying our pockets. It is basically going to return to us manifold. So whatever we spend, in fact, I mean, what we spend for others is in fact like spending on our own selves, because the benefit of that spending, of course, for that moment is going to go to that person, but ultimately it's going to return to us manifold. So God and greed, they are two things which are, they are two entities that cannot exist, they cannot coexist, they cannot be together. And to be a person who is generous, to be a person who is looking after other people, is something which we know that divine scriptures have expressed on numerous occasions. We have seen so many biblical verses telling us and urging us that this wealth that we have is basically, and has been basically entrusted to us by the Almighty. It is basically not only for our own need, but to share with other people who are underprivileged. And on many occasions, we find prophets of God warning us that there are certain pitfalls that we might come across, that we might fall into some traps while we are spending for the cause of God. So remember, this spending must never be for show off. This spending must not be something in which we try to remind others of our acts of generosity, that when we spend on them, then later on we make them realize that we did spend on them. Again, this is a pitfall of being charitable. And at the same time, the Almighty has also said on various occasions that this spending must not be marred in any way by boasting and by showing off that you have done something for the cause of God. Because remember, this is not what has actually been done. Whatever has been spent for our own benefit. So if we show off for that purpose, then it loses its entire importance and significance. So being charitable is not just through wealth, we have seen that charity and at the same time being a charitable person, being a generous person, has a lot to do with an attitude that we have. That and the easiest way to have that attitude, of course, is to empty our pockets. So being charitable, the easiest way to being charitable is to spend. More difficult way to be charitable is to give time, to give effort, to give our energy, to spend our life for a certain cause. So these are the some of the important areas that go hand in hand with being charitable. But as we see that this particular verse from the Gospel of St. Matthew, it warns us that the opposite of being charitable is to be greedy, is to hoard wealth. So a person who has these pitfalls in charity, if he is able to surmount these difficulties, he is able to overcome these difficulties, then on the other hand, he should not become so stringent. He should not become so ungrateful to the Almighty, that realizing that whatever he has is out of his own effort. No, whatever we have been given basically is from God. So lust for wealth and to greed and have that greed for wealth and to always hoard money or wealth, of course, will make us indifferent to the society that we live in. And this is precisely what the Almighty does not want. So viewers, with this, we come to an end to the third segment of our study circle. Now we move on to the fourth segment before we start off our Q&A session. And this is a discussion that we're going to have, and discussion is going to revolve around how can I control my anger. So basically, we will share tips from one another. We'll learn from one another. Maybe people can give us their own experience, that if they have been successful anger managers, they have been able to manage their anger, then what exactly can they suggest to people? Because you see, anger is something that is found in all of us, and we need to control it, because this is something which is basically a weakness. And at the same time, it is also a strength, because at times anger is needed, especially when you see people being oppressed, people being meted out injustice. Anger comes naturally to us. So, but excessive anger or reactionary anger, in which we we don't do constructive things. In fact, we retaliate in a very bad manner. That needs to be controlled. This segment is moderated, and this segment, as I said, is basically a segment in which all of you participate as much as you can, and I urge you to do that. So over to you, Mariam, if you could moderate and start off this discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. So I'll start off the discussion by mentioning two things that have really helped me. One is one of your tips, which was to delay your anger. When you're in the moment and you're feeling angry, do something to delay it, whether it's taking deep breaths or drinking a sip of water. So something to delay the reaction. That's really helped. And also, during that moment, if you can try to understand why is it that you're feeling angry at the situation, and why did the other person do something to anger you? So what was it about their actions? Because sometimes we get angry because we're so in our heads, but we fail to realize that the other person also has a very valid reason for why they're acting. So one was that, and then the other realization that I've had over the years is I study the brain, parts of the brain. So one of the areas that is regulating your emotions is your prefrontal cortex, and that doesn't stop developing until almost your mid-20s. And I feel the difference from my early 20s until now, when I'm in my later 20s, has been dramatic in terms of how much control I feel that I have over my emotions. Of course, alongside, working on my emotions, but also it's become a lot easier to control my emotions. So for any of our younger audiences, keep trying, but also know your brain is still working and developing. So don't give yourself too much of a hard time. Just try your best and realize that, the more you learn, the more you realize that there are parts in life where you're just not as well informed about. And so trying to see things from other people's perspective is going to help you go a really long way in regulating your own emotions towards things. So that was my 2 cents.
That was very insightful, Mariam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Bismillah, Ahmed, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. So, what's helped me is being able to separate my ego from myself. I think that's been the biggest, that was the biggest challenge for me as to why somebody did something to me, or why did they, and how I can basically combat them or how I was right and they were wrong. And when I realized
Mm-hmm.
that I had to just separate my ego from myself and just
Right.
think from the fact that I don't need to win this. You know, I just need to calm down and I just need to tell
Mm-hmm.
myself that maybe the other person's perspective, I don't need to convince them of how I am feeling in that moment. All I need to do is be kind. So when I was
Mm-hmm.
able to separate my
Correct.
ego from myself and let kindness
Mm.
in, I think that really, really helped me because proving
Right.
somebody wrong by telling them again and
Mm-hmm.
again that no, this is what you did and this is what I did, it never goes anywhere. So
Mm.
for me, it was just
Mm-hmm.
being able to separate myself from my ego. So now
Right.
when a situation is such when I know I'm going to get angry because somebody is either hurt my ego or I felt that I was wrong, I just think in terms of
Right.
kindness. I'm like, okay, this
Right.
person, maybe they deserve some kind of kindness right now. Maybe that'll help them. And,
Mm.
if I don't let this bother me, because what I know about myself, I know. I don't need to convince this
Right.
person as to if I was
Mm.
lying or if I was telling the truth or if I was wrong
Right.
or I was right or what they did.
Mm.
That has helped me and I feel that's been 180 for me. So that's my 2 cents that,
Wonderful.
if I was
And
able to
this
separate.
actually needs a lot of patience, and it needs because you step backwards. You take a step back basically, and as you said, you are dealing with an ego, and it's not always easy to deal with your ego because you see your ego spurs you. It gives you the signal that you must not back away. You must answer the person in the same way. In fact, even more. So yes, absolutely correct that if you're able to get hold of your ego at that time somehow, then at that particular moment you might feel as if you've lost something, but in the longer run, as time passes, you would realize that you have in fact taken a step in the right direction.
Yes. And then, I feel age has been a big factor in this. And
Right.
another thing I feel that has really helped me is that, this friend of mine was going through something tough. And I think she
Hmm.
just felt the need to lash out. So in her
Okay.
lashing out, I felt that she was so out of, kind of context. But then I felt,
Hmm.
she's hurting so much. I don't need to tell her that where she's wrong. I just need to step back and kind of let
Hmm.
her vent it out and not let my
Hmm.
ego, just be a friend, just be
Correct.
kind, forget about it.
Correct.
So that has helped
Hmm.
me in the
Hmm.
years, and I feel if we could all practice that, life would be just
Hmm.
easier for everyone. That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We also have a tip from Facebook. Somebody said that they say "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim," and that's been their best help. Um,
Okay. Hmm.
Amar Farouk, you're up next. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम
Walaikum assalam.
जी मेरे एक्सपीरियंस में जी एंगर मैनेजमेंट बहुत अच्छा लफ्ज है यानी जब भी whenever I've been angry so I
Hmm.
come home and I always analyze it especially with the growing age तो मैंने ये फील किया कि यानी being angry I'm always at a loss
Hmm.
so I usually then try to analyze it or especially at workplace if it has gone something beyond. So I usually communicate with those people
Hmm.
the next day or after some time to discuss
Hmm.
with them why the incidents happened, and this has really
Right.
helped me. Like in one more thing, I would say that sometimes if I would say that I would call it a controlled anger, and if you
Hmm.
can plan and
Hmm.
control it, and if
Hmm.
you really need it sometimes, so it is also helpful. But
Absolutely
it's
correct.
it's a bit
Hmm.
difficult.
It's difficult, yes, to regulate your anger, and you know that it's not the
Yeah,
real anger, but you'd like to at least give that
yeah,
impression that you're angry.
yeah. But it is a
Mm.
continuous process.
It is.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. Baran Nashur, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
What personally helps me the most when I'm dealing with anger issues is that I keep reminding myself of one of
Mm-hmm.
the verses in Surah Furqan where Allah says that the servants of the most merciful are those who, even when they are addressed with harsh words, they still speak words of peace. And I just try to view it as a test that the person in front of me is like I almost want to say like a game character, and it's giving me like a quest, like
Mm-hmm.
control your anger. And if you
Mm-hmm.
are successful, you have successfully uh, completed the quest. And if you
Right.
are, if I become angry, that I have basically failed, and I have
Right.
to pay like a punishment, or like my score gets dropped or
Right.
something. So I try to feel like from a rational perspective, a third person perspective, and
Okay.
yeah, so that's what helps me the most.
So you penalize yourself whenever there is unwanted anger. You impose a fine, or what do you do?
Well, I do not impose a punishment on myself, but I just imagine that God is not happy with me with how I just reacted, and that's like the ultimate. The ultimate goal is to make God happy and not myself. So that's what
Okay.
motivates me.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Baran. Yeah, this is interesting.
Rafia Khwaja, please go ahead.
Dr. Shehzad, I feel that if I have an ego, the other person also has an ego. So I
Mm-hmm.
have learned that if I can remain calm and the other
Mm-hmm.
person can be yelling away, now I don't retort, then later on I can speak and say, okay, now let's think how you replied, what you
Mm.
said, and do you
Right.
think that's fair? But if there is a
Mm.
battle, but when I say something, he says something, then it doesn't get somewhere. So I
Mm-hmm.
just think that if I can control my emotions from
Mm-hmm.
inside me, I think that has helped me a lot.
Right. And that control is something that we all need to strive for.
Yeah, that control is within me. It is difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but if I practice it, maybe once or twice I might lose it, but if I practice it, then I can say, okay, I'm not going to give in, I'm not going to retort. This is not the
Right.
way. And I think it is helping me.
That's wonderful.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Saima Khan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, थैंक यू।
Salam.
मेरा जो टेक ऑन है एंगर के ऊपर, हमेशा हमेशा शर्मिंदगी के अलावा कुछ नहीं उठाया है। और दूसरी
Mm-hmm.
चीज ये है कि जो है क्या कहते हैं, एक तो शर्मिंदगी, ऊपर से जो है क्या कहते हैं, आप सही साइड पे होते हुए भी गलत पे आ जाते हैं, चाहे आप कितने भी सही हो।
Right. Right.
It has always put me on the wrong place, and हर किसी की नजरों में आप गलत होते हैं, चाहे मैं कितने भी हक के ऊपर बात कर रही हूँ। तो नो डाउट अबाउट इट, आई डू दैट। आई प्रे एवरी डे 2 नफल of astaghfar for the past, and like something happens in everyday life. This is my practice. I always, and I try to pray it at the time of the Hajjat. And the other take on is that, like, what I have learned, don't try to explain both the parties at the time when they are angry. जब उस टाइम पे एक्सप्लेनेशन आती है ना, आपको और गुस्सा आता है। तो मैंने तो अपने लिए बनाया, मैं उस टाइम पे कुछ भी एक्सप्लेन नहीं करती ना, नीदर आई डोंट वांट टू टेक एनी एक्सप्लेनेशन। व्हेन आपका जब गुस्सा ठंडा होता है, आप भी रियलाइज करते हैं और दूसरा भी रियलाइज करता है, और फिर चीजें खुद ही मेल्ट डाउन हो जाती हैं, खुद ही आपके सामने निकल के सही हो जाती हैं। वक्त जो होता है वो उसको बहुत जल्दी सही कर देता है, हील अप बनस्पत इसके क्या बार बार आप उसको फोर्स करें, फोर्सफुली आप बताएं कि नहीं जी मैं सही थी या वो सही था।
Correct.
तो that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bisma, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, Dr. Saleem, I think a very important thing that I should have mentioned was that my ego has, I think, come more under check since I've started studying the religion more. Because I always first felt, in my prior years, that the angrier I got, I would be able to get my point across. And as the lady prior to me just said, you always end up being the loser. How always. So it's when
Always.
when I started following Professor Ghamdi's lectures some 15 years ago, and I started understanding, every time he would kind of insist on that, and every time somebody talked to him, I remember there was this long series of, I think, 11 hours where he had to answer questions to these two Maulvis or gentlemen who were, and he remained so calm. They tried to get him to get emotional and show a reaction, but he was logically able to explain everything to them while maintaining his demeanor. And that was such an inspiration. So I feel learning from your teachers is a very important part of, being able to get on the right path. So that's what I wanted to say.
Absolutely. You see, as Saima and you yourself have just said, basically when you are angry, even if your stance is 100% correct, you end up on the losing end, because you see, no one is going to look at your stance, they're just going to look at your style. So style is something which is decisive. And if you're angry, then the best of stances, the most correct of stances, they just go down the drain.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I think that was it for all the participants who wanted to take part in our discussion. If anybody still wants to go, please raise your hand now. Last call. Otherwise, we'll move on to Q&A.
Yeah, a couple of things that I'd like to add here is, as Mariam, you just said in your conversation as well, that you see, this anger, first of all, that we must also appreciate this fact that if it is taken in the right perspective, it's not a negative emotion. It's primarily a positive emotion, because it is that self-honor and self-esteem that at times is needed because of that anger that you might have in your own self, or seeing evil to flourish. So you see, if you are not angry on seeing evil flourishing, then there's something wrong in ourselves. So basically, if you that anger has arisen in ourselves because of seeing bad things, or people being oppressed, or people being done bad deeds to, so it's something that should arise in us. The only thing is to channel that anger so that we are not able to harm ourselves or harm other people. And I normally think that there are two ways to go about doing that. So one is a short-term way and one is a long-term way. So short-term way basically is something in which you avoid immediate reaction to any such situation. So basically, as we know, that people suggest that whenever we are angry, the short-term solution to that anger is to delay our reaction and to do certain things that are meant to delay that reaction. For example, we can leave the room, we can take a glass of water, we can draw deep breaths, we can utter certain calming sentences. The thing is that that adrenaline that's going to pump in us is going to take us to a new peak in the next 30 or 40 seconds. So if you are able to delay that peak time in which you are feeling that heat inside of you, is to be done by diverting your attention. So if you are able to do that, you'll see that after a minute or so, or maybe some time, that inside heat, it subsides. So that is the thing that we need to do, and this is what I call a short-term measure or short-term solution, so that you are not rash in expressing your opinion or your reaction by maybe abusing the other person, or you even go as far as to, I mean, physically abuse that person. And we also know that it is this anger which at times makes kill people. So basically, the short-term measure is to somehow delay our reaction. Then we have a couple of long-term measures also, because you see, we get to know ourselves as we grow in life. So one of the things that we get to know about our own selves is that we know the triggers that make us angry. So you see, there are trigger points for each one of us. So there are certain things that are bound to make us angry, come what may. So one thing that we can do, if possible, is to avoid those trigger situations. So at times they are unavoidable, but on many occasions we can avoid those situations that we know that we'll become more vulnerable and we'll be angry. So to understand yourself that you are a person who is going to be angry in such a situation is to actually make that calming effect on your own self, that you are not going to enter into that situation if it is possible. The second important thing is, again, a psychological gimmick. It's like a psychological thing. It has worked. Again, that is a long-term solution, part of that long-term solution. And that is that you program and channelize yourself. And how do you do that? You see, you talk to yourself and you say that, well, whenever the crunch time comes, whenever a time of crisis comes and I'll be angry, I am going to delay my reaction. I am not going to react immediately. So that's like self-preparing yourself or self-preparing yourself before even that moment arises. So this auto-suggestive behavior or self-suggestive behavior, as psychologists call this behavior, is basically your preparation that whenever that crunch time arises, you are not going to react immediately. So you see, what happens is that when you continuously talk to yourself that I'm not going to be reactionary whenever I'm going to get angry, so when that time of anger arises, you have that flash of light in your own brain in which you are reminded that I made this commitment, or I talked to myself that I'll not be angry. And this is that spur of the moment in which, if you're able to just capitalize on that past commitment, is going to help really, really good. Because you see, imagining something much before it actually occurs, it has a very soothing effect, it has a calming effect on us. Another important thing is that whenever you get angry, I mean, anger is basically either on a situation or because someone has done something unexpected, and you are feeling angry at that person. So when the anger is because of a situation that you are in, always think that this situation has arisen in circumstances or in situations or circumstances in which we find ourselves, and those circumstances have been created not by us, by God at large. So we don't have any control of those circumstances. So if those circumstances have arisen, maybe there's something hidden for us, and we just need to back away and trust God, that because we have not created those circumstances, it is God who has given rise to those circumstances. So there is something hidden which is in favor of us, and many a time we do find that good things are hidden for us. And when a person is involved in which you find that your anger is because of a particular person, then what you need to do is, if that person is someone who's known to you, then always take a look at the contributions that he or she might have made in your life. For example, if you get angry at your spouse, or maybe your children, or maybe your parents, and this does happen, and even for your colleagues, immediately turn your attention to the benefits that you have drawn from such and such a person who at that time might be angering you, but in the larger scheme of life has a lot to play and a lot of good to play in your own life. And also, one thing that I'd like to state here, underscore as a very important statement, that remember that as individuals, we need to be relaxed in our lives. You see, what has happened is, because of our lack of self-training, our threshold is very near the boiling point. So a very small thing might trigger our anger. So in order to have that threshold, that buffer to increase, we need to be relaxed individuals. But because we are tense most of the time, so that buffer point or that boiling point comes very soon. And how do we become relaxed individuals? By actually relaxing in life. You see, relaxation in life is something that we need to practice. So things that soothe us, maybe our hobbies, maybe other routines like going for a walk, or maybe drawing fresh breaths or deep breaths. A lot of things tend to relax us. So we must do these relaxation exercises, or relaxation therapy, whatever you may call it, every day, because this is going to bring that threshold down, and the anger point is going to come later, instead of that being so close to the surface. So these are, of course, certain as I said, long-term and short-term measures that might help us. And also, one thing that I'd like to say here finally is that in spite of all these measures, if in spite of all these measures we still express that anger, we're not able to control it, then one thing must be done, and that is, we must apologize to the person that we might have harmed during our anger. We must continue to apologize, because this is something that is absolutely unbecoming, that we vent our anger and don't even realize that we have vented anger. So if this is something which we are not able to help, then of course this is something of a given apology, and also making amends for any loss that we might have caused that person. So amending to make those amends, and at the same time apologizing to that person is also something important. And we must also not forget what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has once stated. And he says that I do not count a person strong who actually defeats someone in wrestling. A strong person is one who actually is able to control his anger. Allazi yamliku nafsahu indal ghazab. Who is able to control. So a person who is strong is not a person who wrestles and wins, but a person who is strong is the one who actually is able to control his anger, because basically it's a weakness. So I think it was a very fruitful discussion, and as I know, this is an area in which we need to work a lot on our own selves, and not only on our own selves, but also pass on this information to our younger lot, to our people, to our younger generation who is growing. And it is something that is a part of their lives, that they become angry very much. So this anger management is something that has to be learned and taught. So now we can perhaps move on to the general Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for all those wonderful tips, and for the participants for participating with their tips. Moving on to Q&A, our first participant is Hira Ali. Please go ahead. Ron Nashur, please go ahead.
Yes, hello. My question was about the fact of giving charity, because we know it's for ourselves, but what if somebody constantly asks you for help in a form of charity, but you are not able to give, or you don't trust this person with the charity that you are giving them, and in the end you decide to not give the charity. But would it be better to still give the charity and get the reward from God yourself and do not care what happens with it, or do we need to be wise with to whom we give our charity?
I think this is a very subjective decision. I mean, it's difficult to advise someone from outside. This is something that you need to maybe talk to your own self or analyze the situation. At times you need to withhold, at times you need to just, let it go. So it is the situation that you find yourself confronted with. And at times you don't have concrete data. So sometimes we become impulsive. Sometimes we just do something, and we don't have a rationale for that. So normally on such occasions I tend to trust my gut feeling and follow that gut feeling. And as I said, that this gut feeling could be different in different circumstances.
But you would not be held accountable for not giving charity to that
Certainly
person.
not. No.
Okay.
Because you see, you're doing this for a certain reason, and that reason has to be, justified before your own conscience.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have a question in the chat. This is a bit of a long one, so please bear with me. But basically, the person is trying to ask, what should they do? So they say that they feel themselves being lost and the odd one in every social setting, which has left them quite lonely and depressed. They get bullied at workplace, and their friends make fun of them. People cross over their boundaries all the time, and they feel like isolating themselves and turning to Allah. But then the relationship that they have with Allah is also surrounded by guilt, and they feel super defeated. They don't know how to live life anymore, and whatever they try to do to shake the guilt and the connection when they're trying to connect with Allah or people, it just never seems to work. So they're not sure what to do. If you can give them any tips.
Right. So I think that this is something which we do face occasionally, and maybe some people face it more often, and we do tend to feel defeated and bogged down, and at times being let down by others as well. But I think one thing that we must always realize is that life is the name of a positive attitude that we have to adopt in the wake of adversities that we might face. So this positivity is something that we must always never lose sight of. And some of the tips to be positive, of course, we've been discussing them earlier, but I'll just remind you that one of the basic tips that helps us remain positive is to always look at our past and see that there were instances in our past in which we were happy, in which we felt that we had been taken care of, and not only our own brethren, but the Almighty continued to be kind to us. And if we are passing through moments of depression, or passing through moments of being let down, or in a feeling that we find ourselves to be unattended, we must never forget that in the past there were moments of happiness and comfort and even luxury. Which means that life is the name of, good and bad circumstances. If we are passing through these tough circumstances, it does not mean that they are going to stay forever. So just as in the past, good circumstances and bad circumstances, they came to us one after the other. In a very similar way, the current circumstance in which we might be passing, which is again making us feel defeated, is inshallah going to end one day, and once again the cycle is going to move on, just as it did in the past. The second tip in this regard that comes to my mind is that we must always keep account of our blessings. To be positive, we have to keep account of what we have instead of thinking of what we don't have. Look at our basic instincts, look at our basic faculties in which we are able to see, we are able to hear, we are able to walk, we are able to talk, etc., etc. These are some of the very, very, these are very obvious favors that we take for granted, without realizing that these are blessings. And especially people who are deprived of these blessings, if you look at those people, we'll realize that how the Almighty has been kind to us. Third thing that makes us positive is to always look at our skill set. You see, every person has a skill set. Every person has some things that he can be proud of. And if you keep a track of your own skill set, you'll find that there are things which the Almighty has given you. And of course, we would not like ourselves to become proud or become we should not indulge in self-praise, but as a means to boost our confidence, as a means to think that again, this is part of that feeling of gratitude, that we analyze our skill set, and we think that, well, there are certain things that of course we cannot do and we are just not able to do, but there are certain things that we are able to do in a very good way. And so therefore, let us be proud of, I mean, not in the negative sense, but in a positive sense, let's be proud of our skill set, let's be proud of our abilities, let's be proud of our contribution to the society and to the people at large, and how we can comfort people around us. So these are some tips, basically, to make ourselves, remain ourselves, I would say, positive in life, and always give the benefit of the doubt to other people, and always give them this leverage, this I would say latitude, that, well, things do go wrong, but then remember that when they go wrong, it's not always that it's we who are programming those things. At times, God creates these situations, that He puts us through these situations, which I just earlier on also referred to actually test our mettle, and also to make us realize whether on certain occasions, if we have lost track of God's blessings, or maybe His own self, then such circumstances are also, I mean, they are a positive sign for us to come closer to God, and to at the same time make ourselves available for the tasks that He might have assigned us and we might have forgotten them.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Saleem. Just a follow-up question. So if their connection with God feels like it's full of guilt, is there something that they can do to help with that, so that it's easier for them to connect?
Right. So you see, guilt is something which should be treasured. Remember, guilt is not a negative feeling. It's a feeling in which we feel remorse, in which we feel bad that we did something. So the biggest remedy to that guilt is to repent before the Almighty, is to talk out our guilt before the Almighty, is to express our remorse, and our feeling that we are ashamed of what we did, and you'd like to make amends. So basically, expressing our feelings before the Almighty, and confessing our guilt, and at the same time making a fresh commitment that in future, inshallah, I'll not be falling prey to certain things that have made me guilty. So that consciousness of guilt, or guilty consciousness, as we often call it, is to be treasured, but it should not overwhelm us, and it should not be something, because remember, one of the beautiful things that the Quran has often said about the Almighty is that He abounds in mercy. He's Ar-Rahman. So the word Ar-Rahman, it occurs so many times in the Quran, and it is meant to make us realize that His mercy is like a effervescent fountain. It's like a fountain which is gushing forth, and He is just waiting for people to come to Him so that He can forgive him. He is just waiting for people that they should come to Him. So that guilt should take us to the Almighty, should make us seek refuge in Him, and talk to Him, and also at the same time make that commitment that I'm not going to fall prey again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem. Nagar, please go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Sabit. Dr. My question is, there are so many interpretation of Quran giving us different dimensions of different ayat. And every dimension is very, very fruitful and very inspiring. So, and if you look at the Salahi school of thought, they are just giving only one interpretation, and they are just limiting us to judge the verse according to the Siyako Spark. So, my question is that the other dimension, which are very, very inspiring, do you think we have to leave them, or you just take them as just what you think about those?
I mean, the important thing is that we have to realize that when God is conveying a message to us, I mean, He has a definite way of conveying things to us. He's not going to convey 1, 2, or 3 or 4 things, because, I mean, as I'm talking to you, I mean, full of, my talk and as human beings, all of us have our deficiencies. So I might have this deficiency in me, that when I speak to you, then multiple meanings could be derived from them because of the lack of right phrases that I choose. But how can we think that God is communicating to us and He might be having diversely different things to convey to us? So I think this is basically a defect if we have multiple versions of a speech, in which a speech is basically meant to communicate the same thing. So it's not the Farai school that is important here. It's basically our own common sense and intellect, which tells us that as far as someone is concerned, when I'm talking to you, when you're reading a book, when you're reading a newspaper, so even in the human plane, basically what is meant to be conveyed is a single thing. You don't want your reader to get confused and each reader to derive different things from your own paragraph. So just as an author would like the purport, his own intention to be interpreted and not various interpretations being ascribed to him, this is something that we don't like ourselves. So how can we ascribe it to the Almighty that He has different intents in the same book or maybe in the same paragraph? So this is a base. As I said, it's a shortcoming, and we human beings might be inflicted with this shortcoming. But how can we say that God is inflicted with this shortcoming? So that is why we say that whatever God wants to convey is definitive. Is something that is, He has it in His mind, and we might not be able to get to it. We might have our own deficiency in interpreting what He has to convey to us, but that doesn't mean that He has different versions or different interpretations that you'd like us to take. And at times, as you can see, if I talk specifically about the Quran, at times you can see that these interpretations of the same text, they are diametrically opposite. So we, of course, this is something of our own shortcoming, but we cannot say that the Almighty at the same time would like us to derive from the same text something which is opposite to someone else's derivation.
So it means then there is one verse. One person is saying that's how we take the negative positivity from that verse, and he interpret it. So it means once a person is taking one verse and he's deriving a lesson from it. So do you think it's not worth to listen to that lesson?
Certainly not. We should listen to that word, because you see, we don't know whether we ourselves have derived the right lesson or not. It's basically the reasoning of a person who that might convince us. So maybe we have derived it wrongly. We must listen to everyone and then decide. I mean, we must not shut off our minds. We must not close our minds, because we don't know whether we are on the right or not. Maybe we have derived it in the wrong way and someone other has the right version. So we must always keep our eyes and ears open and always try to also read and interpret and analyze other people's thoughts, because they might be more correct.
I can give you one example. Dr. Wahiduddin Khan, he was interpreting the verse when the angels descended and they said, and the people are driving, that we have to be in the state of wudu. And he said, Dr. Saab is saying, Wahiduddin is not saying, his interpretation is that the person who has a positive attitude, he will understand the Quran first, not the negative one. He is driving that meaning from that verse.
Well, as I said, he is deriving a certain meaning. He's not alone. There could be 5 other interpreters who derive a different meaning, because that's something humanly that we normally do. The thing is that, as far as I'm concerned, if I have 5 meanings of a verse before me, or 3 or 4 people saying different things, I need to understand the reason of each and give preference to one of those meanings that I think is more appealing to the text of the Quran and to my own sense. Okay. So we are not negating that there are different meanings. There could be. I mean, these different meanings are not because God intends those meanings to be there. It is because that we as human beings have those shortcomings, and at times we are not fully reflective. At times we are lacking in knowledge. So there is going to be this difference. That's humanly. That's a human affair that's going to always manifest itself. All that we need to do is analyze those 4 or 5 different views and accept one of them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Fabi Ahsan, please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
In the history, be it is a religious one or a country's political history, if something is being reported with the continuity or tawatur, and very few people tell that the incident from the very beginning is being reported inaccurately, things occurred the other way. So, what are the ways historians adopt to reach to the facts?
I'm sorry, I could not properly understand. Are you saying that, in the beginning there are reports which are singular and then they dilute or they expand into tawatur, or is it something else that you're saying?
An incident does occur at a time, and since the time of occurrence, people start sharing that incident.
Okay. Okay.
And after a lot of time, few people come forward and tell that the incident didn't occur the way it is being reported. So,
Okay.
what are the ways historians adopt to reach to the facts?
Well, okay. So you see, it depends on the nature of that incident. If the nature of that incident is such that it was reported and witnessed by a huge amount of people, and maybe hundreds and thousands of people saw that, and then all of them reported, so that report is going to carry tawatur or perpetuation, nevertheless, because you see, at the very start of that incident, a lot of eyewitnesses were there. But what if that incident happened in a small affair, in a limited affair, and there were very few eyewitnesses, let's say 3 or 4? And from those 3 or 4, of course, there could be people who might, there could be many people who are going to report, but at the end of the day, they are at the top of the chain, you just have 3 or 4 people. So you see, all such incidents which are reported by a few individuals because there are very few eyewitnesses, about them, we need to always understand that they can be subject to interpretation of those people, because you see, those eyewitnesses which are 3 or 4, they are now going to convey that incident to another 3 or 4 people, and maybe to another 2 or 3, and so on and so forth. So it depends how those people catch the interpretation of the previous narrator, and this could get colored. So therefore, on all such occasions, we need to historically apply principles of criticism to understand whether the original incident occurred in the way it is being reported or not. So this is how presumptive history is transferred. But then we have established history, which I talked about earlier, and that means that a very wide range of eyewitnesses, like it's like a whole generation of witnesses being present and reporting it. So in that case, the understanding or the interpretation does not matter, because you see, it's like an eyewitness account being transferred to thousands of people who transfer it to thousands of people verbatim, which means that they are transferring it the way they saw it. And this actually lends a lot of credence, a lot of certitude to that incident. So if we are able to understand that one is presumptive history, which means a few people narrating that incident, and that narration being dependent on whom you are narrating that to in the next generation, and so on and so forth, before it is recorded. But in the case of established history, a very, very large number of people who are eyewitnesses to that event, they, for example, they transfer it, and then thousands of people, they receive it and they transfer it in the same way. So if you are able to make sense of these two modes of history, presumptive history and established history, you'll always come to realize that it is this established history which is always, it always gives us that certitude, that sense of certitude, and you cannot be in doubt about it. But presumptive history, because of the nature of its transmission, is always subject to interpretation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Habiba Zafar, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Waalaikum
Sir,
assalam.
you may answer in English, but I want to explain my question in Urdu. Sir, एक
Okay.
psychological disorder है OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, और उसमें ये
Right.
होता है कि किसी भी इंसान को obsessive thoughts आती हैं, and then उसके लिए coping mechanism उसका कोई compulsion होता है. अब वो कोई compulsion या कोई physical compulsion हो सकती है जो कि observable हो, या उसकी कोई mental compulsion हो सकती है. So अभी मेरी एक relative है, उन्होंने मुझसे थोड़ा सा discuss किया, because मैं भी psychology की student हूँ, तो she said कि उन्हें जब शुरू में जब वो थोड़ी बच्ची थी तब से उन्हें ओसीडी हुआ, और बाद में पता चला उनको अवेयरनेस आई कि ये ओसीडी था। तो क्या होता था कि उन्हें ऑब्सेसिव थॉट्स आती थी, उन्हें ब्लास्फेमस थॉट्स आती थी, उन्हें इंट्रूसिव थॉट्स आती थी जिनके ऊपर उनका कंट्रोल नहीं था। तो उससे कोप करने के लिए, और बेसिकली उसको कहते हैं स्क्रपुलोसिटी, ये जो रिलीजियस ओसीडी होता है, उसको कोप करने के लिए वो अल्लाह मियाँ की कसम उठाती थी कि अल्लाह मियाँ की कसम ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है, या उन्हें मतलब बहुत इस तरह की थॉट्स आती थी। अब वो मुझसे कहती हैं कि मैंने इतनी सारी अल्लाह मियाँ की कस्में उठा ली हैं कि मैं अगर उसके लिए एक्सपिएट करना शुरू करूँ तो मुझे पता भी नहीं है वो कितनी हैं, एंड अब वो थेरेपी ले रही हैं, उसके लिए उन्होंने जो दवाइयाँ होती हैं वो लेना शुरू की हैं। तो माय ओनली क्वेश्चन इज़, क्या उन्हें उतना एक्सपिएट करने की ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि वो तो एक बीमारी के ज़रिए ऐसा ही कर रही थी ना?
She does not need to expiate or give any atonement, because this is a very specific situation that she could not have helped, and so therefore she does not need to be worried about any expiation.
Thank you so much, sir. Jazakallah.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Fabi Ahsan, please go ahead.
Saji, I have another question. We know a word is being used both in the common language as well as in a specific field of knowledge. Consequently, its verbal and terminological meaning may be different. Same is the case with the word in two different branches of knowledge. Word tawatur in hadith is used for riwaya having a specific chain of narrators in every age, whereas Ustaz Javed Ahmed says that it will encompass countless number of people in a particular age, in every age in fact. My question is, does he say this while standing in the branch of history instead of standing in the branch of hadith?
No, actually, you have to understand that there are two kinds of tawatur that Islamic jurisprudence is aware of. So one of them is that historical, that one of them is that hadith tawatur, and that is entirely different from the tawatur which the Suliyin speak of. And as far as the hadith tawatur is concerned, it is not a generation to generation transfer as is the case with the Usuliyin tawatur. It only means that a large large number of people convey a certain narrative, but in the sense that the people might be, the number might be quite large, but it still is not sufficient to render it absolutely free of any fault, and there are still 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people who are narrating. On the other plane, we have that the tawatur of the Usuliyin, in which religion has been transferred. For example, the Qur'an has been transferred or the Sunnah has been transferred, in which generations of people transmit either through their oral, through the oral mode like the Quran, or through the practical perpetuation, like for example the prayer or the zakah. In that case, we have the tawatur which is called the tawatur of the usuliyin. So the usuliyin or the the jurists, they talk about this tawatur when they talk about the transmission of Quran or the Sunnah. Hadith tawatur is something which is entirely different. It does not, it's a different thing altogether. It does not relate to a large number of people in such, large as that they are rendered, without any chance of being wrong. It only means that a substantive number, which might be 10 or 15, maybe, or 30 people transmitting. So a hadith mutawatir is something which still is presumptive. It is still which is something that can be called to question. It is still something that might have defect because it does not possess the tawatur of what we say the Suliyin have. And it is because of precisely this reason that we can say that there is not a single hadith which is the mutawatir in the sense that the Suliyin talk about. The Suliyin talk about tawatur in the sense that a whole generation is transmitting something to the next generation. This is something which a hadith never has. So the tawatur of hadith, the way we understand it, is entirely different, and the nature of the tawatur which the Usuliyin speak of, it cannot be implemented on the tawatur of the muhaddisun. And if you'd like to study more about it, I would advise you to read this book by Khatib Baghdadi, which is called Al-Kifaya fi Ulum al-Riwaya, and he will basically, he'll explain it to you that this tawatur which the Usuliyin speak of is different from the tawatur which the muhaddisun speak of.
Habiba Zafar, please go ahead.
अच्छा सर, मेरा एक और सवाल है, इसको भी आप इंग्लिश में ही बताइएगा। सर, ये थोड़ा-सा पर्सनल सवाल है, यानी आपको पता है कि हम ओवर द इयर्स ग्रो करते हैं और हम अच्छे इंसान बनने की कोशिश करते हैं। तो जब जिस तरह जो आपका प्रेज़ेंट होता है, अल्लाह मियाँ उसी को देखता है। तो जब हम किसी से दोस्ती करते हैं या हम किसी से सलाम दुआ करते हैं, तो हमारा एक बहुत पॉज़िटिव इमेज पोर्ट्रे होता है। या जिस तरह फॉर एग्ज़ाम्पल मैं अब नमाज़ पढ़ती हूँ, कुरान पढ़ती हूँ, आई एम अ मोर रिलिजियस पर्सन नाउ, आई फ़ील मोर पायस, और मैं अपने आप को ग्रूम कर रही हूँ। लाइक आई एम 21 ईयर्स ओल्ड, बट समटाइम्स मुझे ऐसा गिल्ट कॉन्शियस आता है कि यार मैं पहले तो ऐसी नहीं थी, एंड आई समहाउ फील एक थोड़ा-सा गिल्ट कि अगर कोई मेरी इस प्रेज़ेंट चीज़ से इंस्पायर हो रहा है या इम्प्रेस हो रहा है, तो मेरे दिल में एक आवाज़ आती है कि तुम पहले तो ऐसी नहीं थी, और मुझे नहीं पता शायद वो शैतान की तरफ से आती हो या क्या आती हो। तो वो एक नेगेटिव सा इमोशन होता है। आपने जो प्राउड होने की बात की ना अपने ऊपर, वो थोड़ा-सा ये हो जाता है कि ये फीलिंग आती है कि तुम्हें अपने ऊपर प्राउड नहीं होना चाहिए बिकॉज़ तुमने 5 साल पहले ये झूठ बोला था, या तुमने ये गलती की थी, या तुमने ये गलती की थी। तो इस बारे में आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
I think this is a good feeling because you see it cuts you to size. It makes you realize that in the past there were shortcomings that we were going through, but at the same time you must not brood and be bogged down that because in the past you were such and such a person, so now if you're a changed person, what does it matter because your past cannot be changed. So remember, God is not going to judge you from your past. He's going to judge you on your latest situation. So we have moved on in life, and if we move on in life, we always should think that the past is something that we must learn a lesson from and then bury it. Other than that, it has no significance. So yes, at times this happens, but then if it happens, then the best thing is that you draw that lesson that if you were doing something wrong, then maybe you should also not feel so proud of yourself that today, if you have those positive traits, that remember one time you were afflicted with certain negative things as well. So that is something which could balance, it could be a balancing act. So that is one thing. But the other thing is that remember that the Almighty is not going to judge you on the basis of your past.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Habib, if you have a follow-up, you could go ahead and ask.
अच्छा सर, मेरा एक और क्वेश्चन ये है कि अक्सर जब फ्रेंड्स बैठी होती हैं या आपकी किसी से दोस्ती होती है, तो वैसे ही बातों-बातों में कोई आपसे पूछता है, अच्छा आपसे ये कभी सिन हुई है या ये कभी सिन हुई है, तो अगर आप उसको नहीं बताते या और आपने वो किया होता है, तो मैंने ये सुना है कि अपनी सिन्स को कंसील रखना चाहिए, एंड जो अल्लाह मियाँ ने कंसील रखा है, आपको उसको भी कंसील रखना चाहिए। बट अगर मैं उसको कंसील रखती हूँ, तो क्या ये मेरे ऊपर झूठ नहीं होगा कि मैं झूठ उसको बांध रही हूँ?
So I think it is the way you deal with this question. So whenever someone asks you this personal question, the best answer is that please let this remain between me and my God. So you're not lying when you're just asking people that please don't bother me.
Curiosity लोगों में और बढ़ती है, and they tend to ask you again and again and उस तरह करके
I mean, you see, it depends on the situation. At times, as I said, they could be very fast friends that you might feel comfortable in sharing what you need to share. But at other times,
is it obligatory to tell them the truth? Because, like, for example,
no, certainly not. Certainly not. Certainly not. It's not mandatory at all. I mean, it's your choice. And as I said,
चाहे वो आपका spouse हो, कोई भी हो.
I mean, it depends on the situation, it depends on your relationship, and it depends the amount of trust that you have. It's not a blanket answer that can be given. It could be different in different circumstances.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I apologize. I want to ask you a question that you already explained, but you can give me an answer very briefly. Who are the Asuleens?
Asuleen are the people who actually study the principle, the discipline of Usul al-Fiqh. Usul al-Fiqh basically is a discipline in which you study how to derive rulings from the sources, and at the same time, what exactly are those sources. So the Usuliyin are people who are specialists of Usul al-Fiqh.
To understand the Qur'an.
Yeah, I mean,
because you separated
if you've heard of Usul al-Fiqh, if you've heard of jurisprudence, so fiqh is jurisprudence, and Usul al-Fiqh are the principles of jurisprudence. So people who are doctors of the principles of jurisprudence are called the Usuliyin.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Bismillah, Ahmed, please go ahead.
So, Dr. Saleem, usually when one's having discussions about Islam, I know we shouldn't do it, but invariably it happens. There are people who claim a moral superiority, holier than thou attitude, and they're a little more condescending if they've been, at it for longer than people who may have come to it, off late or whatever. What is the best response? To just stay silent, or what is the best way to go about it?
Again, I said it's difficult to give a blanket answer because you see, it all depends on who the person is. At times you just need to smile back, at times you need to change the topic, at times you might reveal a part of it, at times you think that you can discuss the whole that you have in mind. It all depends who is in front of you. See, people have different capacities and people are of different approaches. There are people who have closed their minds, people who are open to discussion. So it all depends who you are facing. So I always have learned this, and I always try to pass it on to others, that always pick and choose your audience of discussion. Not everything can be discussed with everyone. Only people who are open to, who are open-minded, who would like to know there are alternative interpretations, or there could be a different viewpoint as well, who are open to accept different viewpoints. They might not agree with that, but they are at least have that. I would say the approach in which they would say that, well, you could have a point, although I don't agree with it. So unless you have people who are willing to discuss, who are conducive to discussions, it's better to stay. It's better to change the topic and discuss, let's say, about the weather or something more congenial to that person.
Okay, so just taking off of this point, isn't it better to be humble about religion? Like if I'm doing something, I don't need to tell people I'm doing it. That's my question. Aren't you supposed to be humble about it? Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely fine. Yes. Yes,
Thank
that's
you so
correct.
much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all of the questions. Any last call for any additional questions? If not, we'll be ending the session, inshallah. All right, I think that was it. Thank you very much for everyone that came today and participated, shared their wonderful tips with us on controlling our anger, and also asked some very insightful and thoughtful questions. Inshallah, see you all tomorrow in another session of textual study of the Qur'an. And until then, assalamu alaikum.